in progress.
You guys, thank you so much for your patience. This is new, LinkedIn Live. Oh my gosh, we figured it out. But thank you for joining us this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you're coming in from. Thank you. We are talking about military and law enforcement communication. My name is Vanessa Donaldson. I am a military spouse empowerment guide, and I have with me Janet Wizawati today, who is on the law enforcement side with in Canada. So both retired spouses. Both I was with still am married to my Marine 26 years. And Janet, how many years with your guy? You're way ahead of us.
51.
Oh, okay. You see, like, just lead the show. Let me sign off. Well, different stages. We all have different stages where we can, still add value and impact others. So yeah, many years combined, I guess, that we have been married to spouses. So today we wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about communication. I found just with my coaching clients that this is always an issue that comes up. How we're communicating with our significant others. We're living with them, day in, day out. The dynamics change if they're active duty and they're deploying and they're, going away from the family. You're solo, single mom kind of parenting, doing your own thing, and then they come back. So today we're going to share 6 tips for communicating either with your military spouse or law enforcement spouse. So the reason those two blend together is because they're both like very high stress level jobs, right? And it requires just a lot of patience, understanding, empathy. Those are the words that come out a lot when people are like, oh my gosh, you're married to Marine. Like they literally say, you're married to Marine, you must have a lot of patience. Do people ever ask you that, Janet? Do they say that?
I don't know about patience so much as how do you do it?
Yes.
Like the patience doesn't come into it so much, but how do you do it? How do you adjust to the shift work? How do you adjust to the moves, all the moves? Because unlike a lot of law enforcement, my husband was in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So that's a federal police force. And we can get transferred. We were transferred about every 3 years. We spent 8 years, the longest, in Vancouver, British Columbia, 5 years in Toronto. So, but we lived in small communities, and I have some experience on a base because we lived in a place called Masset where there was a joint military base with the US and Canada. It was a communications base. And because the RCMP didn't have housing, we lived in a PMQ. So we lived right on the base. We were part of the base and everything. So I have some understanding of that too. And it's not that different.
Exactly. Not that different. I was just speaking yesterday with another military spouse in Canada. I don't know what part, but we had so many similarities. She's active duty. I'm on the retired side, so I'll be having some conversations with her. I've coached a military spouse in England. We connected through LinkedIn. Someone connected us. And at first I thought, what am I doing with these spouses overseas? Like I thought I'm working in the US or my audience was the US, but we found out very quickly that didn't matter what country you're living in. If you're a military spouse, you're experiencing similar, pain points around being a single parent, the isolation, moving to a base, having to start over all the time, relocating with your job, maybe staying home one season, then going to work, part-time, full-time, daycare, all of it. So the stress when our guys deploy and wondering when the phone rings, what that call is going to be on the other end. So yeah, we actually have a lot in common with military spouses, worldwide. So it was interesting to have that conversation. We'll probably have more of that. But today for the 6 tips for communicating with our military and law enforcement spouses, the first tip, number 1, would be listening actively. So easier said than done. And I'm a talker, so I could start, my poor husband's just eyes start to cross. So the coaching space has really helped with the, listening actively. So when you're talking to your spouse, that means full attention. That means like the cell phone has to go down. That's like a trigger. If I'm trying to have a conversation with my husband and I'm on my phone trying to work, pumping out a text to Janet, hey, we're meeting tomorrow or whatever, they notice those things, and look back at when our kids were younger and, they're sitting at the table. Like we had a rule, no phones at the table. Like you have to set these boundaries because the technology is just seeping into every, ounce. We're going to be chipped one day where we're not even going to have a phone, I guess. It's just going to be just hold your arm up and swipe here or whatever. So listening actively with like full attention so that you can try to understand and realize that, everybody has a different perspective. I remember a pastor had come over, a friend of ours from a church we were in California. And my husband's telling him, it wasn't like counseling, but it was like really a nice, quick mini counseling session. It was kind of nice. And he said, yeah, my wife, she just doesn't do it this way, or I don't get it. Like, she's just not doing it right. And the pastor looked at him and said, not everybody thinks like you do, And I was like, oh, that was beautiful, just summed up months and weeks of arguments over whatever, because everybody has a different perspective. So part of that listening actively is to have that different perspective. And then along with that, the other points with that go with not interrupting or giving unsolicited advice. That's something I'm always working on, because, I got so many nuggets and things I could share. But if they didn't ask for it, ask, permission to coach, permission to add my input. If not, it's the listen actively. What would you have to add to that, Janet, on that note?
Agree 100%. The other thing I would, especially if you're physically with the person or even on a call like this, is to watch the body language. And you're so right about, especially with us as coaches and with our life experience over the years, and that it's so easy to be thinking, oh, I could tell her that, or, oh, I could say that, or this is an idea. And because we think like that, our head is constantly going. It's a real muscle to exercise to keep that present, to be very present with that person. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like, go on, or can you explain? Just sometimes just to let them know that you are actively listening and that your mind hasn't wandered off. So
beautiful. Yeah, body language is huge. And you learn that in your training too. Like, you get more context and views on someone by their body language, even than before they've even opened their mouth and spoken. Like, it's a higher percentage than the talking even. So body language is huge. So, which I guess I would add to, be affectionate with your spouse. If that's not your love language, and maybe that's not his, but I want my spouse to know that I love him. And so I will hug them in the middle of the day. I will go give them a kiss for no reason, like constantly. And the older we get, I feel like the less time we have together, and I just get, more intentional about that. And, it's constantly like, what was that for? Absolutely nothing. I just wanted to give you a kiss. I just wanted to give you a hug. So yeah, that kind of thing. So
there's another thing is tonality, your tone. The other thing, when you talk about the attention and stuff, when Les and I did a program, it was called Marriage Encounter, and we did it through our church, and that, and it was a weekend away, and it's just built on communications and that. And one of they said, if you're going to argue, or you have a discussion, is hold hands.
Wow. Hold hands is one thing, and I think a pastor's
like
told us to
both and face each other, look at each other, like don't turn your back, like just look at each other when you're talking.
I might try that one. That's intense. Holding hands. That's almost as close as prayer. Like, it's almost like the prayer position. And if you're trying to pray with each other, it's hard to have an argument and be mad at each other if you're trying to now bring it to God and lay it on the table. So that connection of holding hands, or physically even like that, you can't stay in that fight mode. So that good tips. My goodness. Okay. So tip number 1, we said listen actively. We went through that. Now we have our second tip, if you're joining us late, for communicating with a military spouse or law enforcement spouse. And that would be to be supportive. So what that would mean is, life is stressful in this realm. They're coming and going. Imagine like the command and the chain that they're answering to, all the responsibilities on their plate. That took me, a few minutes to understand when I first was a young married wife. I just thought, he just comes home and he has no more worries and cares of work. And, it's all about me now and the baby we're raising or whatever. But being supportive to understand that, we don't know what their day was like in the office, and all of the glass balls that we're juggling, glass balls and rubber balls, that whole terminology, what went to the ground and bounced up, what broke, and, all of the stresses that they have. And depending how your husband, vents about it. Some come home and maybe they vent about it, or they just keep it to themselves. Mine was very compartmentalized. He left all his work in the office. It was amazing. And it was a blessing to me because I didn't have to deal with any of the baggage that he had from work. He left that all at work and came home and just wanted to be totally present as a husband and a father. So yeah, but if you're bringing all that baggage home too, then we're taking on that negative energy and of what's going on in the office, and that we're not going to be solving anything on that end. So just be supportive in your own way, dealing with those deployments, all the moves, the long hours, and just I guess make them feel like they're appreciated, wanted, needed. And when you're at home, that's the sanctuary. It's a safe space where they can walk through those doors and know that someone's not going to be on that end too, that they have to fight with about something else. The dishwasher broke or something didn't go right at school with the kids. I mean, you can still talk about it, but I had learned I needed to leave like even some space for my husband when he first came home. Like he's walking through the door. I'm trying to toss him a baby in diapers that I'm just up to here doing the parenting thing. And I'm like, I need a break. I'm trying to toss him stuff and go off and finish dinner or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like maybe he just needs to take off his boots first and just like let his feet breathe a little and sit down in the recliner and just like gather himself and get, that composure. So being supportive that way, and asking, I have learned this through church too. Like we don't want to ask sometimes because that means we have to do something. But really the question is, how can I support you, honey? What can I do to help you right now? I mean, rather than trying to figure out their love language, figure out what they want, just ask. So what would you add in the tip about being supportive, Janet?
Well, one of the things that, of course, they're trained not to talk, right? They're trained even, not to bring anything home. But the thing is there's the nonverbal bringing home. And in cases very young in a career, and two little babies, like our kids are a year apart. So two young babies and this one time, so out of character. So watch for the out of character, because Les came home, or Les was home or before me, picked the kids up with the babysitter, and I came home. Something had happened at work. I was upset, and he yelled at me, which totally wasn't in character with him. But you know what? I wasn't that long into it. He'd been in the force, 2-3 years. And, but as it turned out, that he had attended the death of a child. But I didn't find out that for till 3 weeks later from somebody else, because he's not talking about it. So I watch for that. And many years later, there was a psychologist that they brought in to talk to the spouses and the couples. So we were all in as couples, and they said, when your husband walks in the door and kicks the dog, he's not mad at the dog and he's not mad at you. So just leave him that time and to understand. But when we get caught up and they're angry and we get angry, that doesn't serve anything. But, just think what works. And it's a growing process, but it took me finally, I ended up working for the force too, to see the other side. And so they can't always see our side, staying home all the time with the kids and what we put up, until they do it. And then they get an idea, right? So I was in hospital one time and he had to do it all. So you know what? It's that give and take. It's just that understanding. It's a work in progress. And that's why today we have coaches in that. Whereas in the days when I did it, we just had like senior spouses that would give us tips. Like I had one spouse say to me, says, Janet, don't worry about your housework. It'll be there tomorrow, but your husband might not be. So, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that communications, but it's patience, and patience with yourself. Patience with yourself, because it's so easy. Like you say, you've got babies at home and you're trying to juggle everything. And especially when they're deployed, they have their troop or their group of people that they're with that they can decompress after. And we're not them. So it's harder for them when they're at home going daily to work to decompress.
So good. So good. And I'm seeing like we could probably go on for 2 hours with this conversation. So I think we're going to have to do a cliffhanger, and we're going to go through 3 points today, and to keep it shorter because we want to honor people's time, and then come back for the other 3 points, because the stories that we have, and when we expand on just a point, like we want to bring real value, and I don't want to rush through it. So are you okay with that too? That
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
2 points, and then we'll put a note out there for the other 3. So the third tip of the 6 for communicating well with our military and law enforcement spouses would be keeping an open mind. So yes, that would be tip number 3. So you might have different beliefs. You might have even, I went away. You might even have different upbringing in your like religious foundations, right? That's a huge thing. So in non-denominational, or in the Bible, it says, don't be unequally yoked, which happens a lot. So that's just another added little baggage that you're bringing into the marriage. So being open-minded of how, your other person, your other half was raised, being respectful of the things that they grew up with, and what they put in their mindset and what their parents taught them. It's not going to be the same as yours. So just having an open mind about that. And that just goes back to, perspective, that our way is not always the right way, the highway. And so what can you add about being open-minded, Janet, with our spouses?
So true about what you say about the different faiths. My husband was raised Catholic, was an immigrant. His parents immigrated after World War II. And so very, very Eastern Europe, so very different, raising a family, different of how he grew up compared to me, like fourth generation Canadian, and raised as in United, so Protestant. So that was something, but being open-minded and combining it, and just again, that open communications. If one way is not working, how can we make it work? Like, let's work together to make it work. That, find an equal place. Like, our faith is our faith, much more than our religion. Our religion didn't depict how we acted. It was our strong faith that did.
That's beautiful. Yeah, the faith part is huge. And when we try to resist and work separate, like every year, the statistics for military, I'm sure, and law enforcement marriages for divorce is pretty high. I mean, I think over 50%, if I just would, Google every time or start reading statistics. Over half of our population is ending in divorce. And, for a lot of these reasons with communication, and we'll have some other talks on finance, communications and finance. Those are like the top tiers for things that can just like break the straw on the camel's back. That's, someone just says, I've had it, I'm out, I'm done. So, and it takes effort, it takes work, it takes intentional acts. Words are lip service. And if we keep saying, oh, I'm sorry I did that, or whatever, or like you say, the tone, it doesn't have as much effect as if you're showing, grace, showing empathy. The action speaks so much louder. So yeah, keeping an open mind for that. Going to church, I think just this past weekend, the pastor had talked about, this is one other tip just came back to me. He mentioned, we're adding other tips in here, but it all flows together. He mentioned, when you're arguing too, and you're having a disagreement, which it's okay to argue and have healthy disagreements in a marriage. If you're never fighting or having your say or your way, whatever, like that's kind of a red flag too. Like you have to have your own identity and your own, thoughts and opinions that you get to lay on the table. So, but he had mentioned, don't argue in front of the children. And that was a huge help and a tip that we learned younger on. Your kids don't want to see you, mom and dad, getting into it together at the table or running around the house, just completely in a rage or whatever. Like, calm it down, take it behind closed doors, and speak together separately. And maybe the voices are raised. The kids might still hear some mumbling through the door, but it's not right in front of them. It's a healthy way to raise them to think, okay, mom and dad are having a chat in the room now. So better.
Can I add to that?
Yeah. Your eyes were like, oh, I have something to say. So I'm just going to add that tip from Pastor Mark at Community Life Church in Port Charlotte from this past weekend. What are you adding, Janet?
What I'm adding is my son one time, and he was about 15, maybe 16, and Les and I were in the kitchen, and we heard our son say, "No, my parents aren't fighting. I've never seen them fight. They're just talking about work."
That's great. That's great. And a teenager.
Because we've had very active conversations, because he was administrative and I was, operational. So
I know, both in the military, serving in the military or law enforcement. So that's, oh yeah, that could get some heated stuff. But to have a teenager see from his eyes, say like they're just talking about work. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's our kind of 3 tips, the main 3 tips out of the 6 for communicating with military and law enforcement spouses. We said number 1, listen actively. Number 2, be supportive. Number 3, keep an open mind. And we peppered in number 4, don't argue in front of the children. So, yeah, we'll pepper in a few more here and there. And so, yeah, in closing, we'll just make this our first part series. We're maybe not turn it into a Netflix. We don't want to have people hang on. They have to chime in for like 20 episodes, but definitely we hope we can bring value to anybody that's in that season, maybe still active duty, because we're on the retirement side of things. And yeah, if people want to connect with you, Jana, how do they reach you online?
Do you know what? They can find me on Facebook. My name is there, Janet Wizawati. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn. So they can easily do that. And WhatsApp. I'm on WhatsApp too.
They're all over. I know.
So you know what? They can Google my name. They'll find me. I'm an author, so they can find me on Amazon too. So
all over. So, and to reach me, you can reach me at resetwithvanessa.com. On there will be all my other links to social media. So resetwithvanessa.com. And I am also doing VA disability audits now. For just a few weeks, I'm going to be taking a few more clients on. So my text is in the screen here. If you want to text VA disability and put your first name, text it to the phone number 949-776-8731. That's 949-776-8731. One of my missions is to help our U.S. military veterans get the compensation, the financial compensation they deserve when they get out of the military. And with all of the transition going on and the overflow of information leaving, sometimes that paperwork gets put on the back burner. So I'm actually in a community with a lot of retired vets, and we go back to Vietnam veterans. So I'm getting a few calls now with just in my local area, just for people asking, what can we do to help? So it's a simple process. I collect a screenshot of the combined disability rating to see what percentage they're at. So, and of course, this is service-connected claims that are in the system with the VA. And I work with a third-party contractor. And so together we will see if there's a case and move it forward. And a few months later, it could be a game changer. So if you're struggling with your VA claim and you're stuck and you just don't know where to turn, you can at least have a free consultation with us to see if we can help. So again, you can text me VA audit with your first name and put it to phone number 949-776-8731. So thank you so much, Janet. And we will have you back on to continue for more communication tips. Oh boy, we could do this for months, but we'll try to narrow it down. And we'll see you next time. Just stay tuned and we'll put out another, check my LinkedIn for another event when it comes out in the next week or so. All right. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye, everyone.